professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:08 on CJD. Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. Josh, how are you?
Happy Halloween.
Indeed, you are a joyful accountant today with your jester hat.
My jester hat. I'm very serious, but also very happy and very playful.
Yeah, we might want to take that off. It's going to make quite a bit of racket.
All right.
There you go.
There we go.
Now you're just an accountant. A smooth accountant.
Just. Thank you.
Josh, welcome back for another edition of Today's Entrepreneur. And this week, we're going to go to new heights on the program.
Tonight, Mark Kalis is with us from Kalusair. Now, aviation business, that's a scary business to get into. So certainly no perfect night than Halloween to hear a lot about Kalusair from Mark and see how he kind of navigated through the airs with all the ups and downs. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what Kalusair is and what you do today, and then maybe you can take us back to the beginning.
Okay, well, Kalusair Services, I started it myself in 1985, and we saw a demand in the aviation business for contractual employees, contractual help, and there wasn't a lot of jobs at the time. So starting the business enabled me to offer aviation services, maintenance services, pilot services. And over the years, that has developed into a technical consulting business. We've diversified into several other divisions, operating aircraft, offering technical expertise to people all over the world, banks, financial institutions. It's an all-around aviation technical services that we offer.
Now, how did you get into this business?
Well, it's funny. I've been in the business since I was 16 years old. Got a pilot's license when I was 16 and an engineer's license when I was 19. I was, at the time, the youngest in Canada, apparently, for whatever that was worth. But that's how I got into aviation, and then quickly got into a different type of the business that took me around the world traveling, and that really got me a lot of worldly experience. And with that, a lot of contacts, a lot of various experiences, and that just kept on developing. And that's basically how we got started offering services.
Now, I can imagine that it can't be an inexpensive business to get into. Did you need a lot of capital to start up? How did that happen?
Well, it's a funny thing. We always have the joke, how do you make $1 million in aviation? Well, you start with two.
Yeah.
But so it was tough at the start, and trying to get financing for a business in aviation has always been difficult. There's always ups and downs in the industry that cause a strain on in our business. So I really started with $5,000 in my pocket and a bit of guts and gave it a go. So it's getting financing is tough.
How competitive was the industry when you started?
Well, it's a funny thing is that it's always been competitive, and it's always been kind of like a no guts, no glory thing. You have to have confidence in what you do, and you have to be able to know what services you can offer and stand behind your product, and your product is yourself. So the business, especially, and I hate to use the cliche, the ups and downs, it has been a business of ups and downs, and you have to diversify. You have to be able to move when the industry falls and be ready to offer what it is demanding at various different cycles. And we've been seeing the cycles in aviation for years. You can almost predict them. So I've always been able to be there and offer what services the industry did want as it went through its various cycles.
You said you were unique in what the schooling and your experience. So do you have competition?
Yeah, and there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of people that do a lot of different things in the industry. I like to think that I not so much can do everything in the business, but know how to get the information that they're going to need. And I do that through a network of other colleagues. So when you look at competition, it really depends on if you're going to develop a niche business or if you're going to try to be, run with the pack and the airlines, which is too competitive to be able to offer a service.
Is it cutthroat? Is there a lot of collaboration because of the specialized field and the international nature behind it?
Yeah. I can't say that it's an easy business to stay into. There is a lot of it's a tough business to be in, especially when you get into the high market thing, corporate jets. We're talking a lot of big dollars. So it can be very cutthroat. You really have to know your business, stay within your niche, stay within your specialty. don't stray out into an area that you're not comfortable with, because you'll be eaten alive if you're trying to get into something that you really don't know what you're doing.
Have you ever been tempted to go a certain way and you kind of pulled the reins back, or you've gone down a certain route where you kind of think back and say, maybe I shouldn't go there and I should stay away?
Oh boy, I could tell some stories, but I do remember in a particular opportunity that I saw, and I thought this could be something good. I should dabble into it. I should put my toe into it. And one of the industry pros really came to me and gave me a very clear indication that you don't want to play in our sandbox. So I sort of I've had some various experiences over the years that sort of guided me where to stay away and stick with what you know, stick with what you're comfortable with. And
actual threats? Somebody?
Not really threats, but they made it known that this is our business. You don't know the business, so and especially when you talk about parts and marketing, remarketing airplanes, big ticket stuff, it can be pretty aggressive. So.
You do business all over the world, Mark, and I know you have some interesting stories to tell about certain parts of the world that you visited, and we're going to get to that in a second. Mark Kalis is our guest from Kalusair on today's Entrepreneur. It's coming up to 7:15 right now on CJ80.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:18 on CJ80. Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur. Our guest this evening is Mark Kalis of Kalusair. And Mark, we're talking about how you took your business from one that is based just here in Montreal to one that operates internationally. When did you make that leap? And what have been some of your experiences working all over the world?
Well, I started in the business actually traveling a lot. I get into something we call airborne geophysics. So we use airplanes with all kinds of geophysical equipment inside, and we fly low level along the ground looking for oil and gold and diamonds and stuff like that. So I got into the business in that arena. So I traveled a lot, went all over the world. And so that gave me a lot of worldly experience. So that was at the core roots of my beginning. So it was a natural thing for me when I started my business to reach out to a lot of my colleagues and connections that I had over in Africa, the Far East, throughout Europe. And because the aviation manufacturing world is basically here in North America, a lot of it is here. So to have a contact here to service my clients around the world, to give them the various technical services that they needed, was a natural for me, and I had a lot of connections that way. So,
tell me a bit more about this airborne geophysics. Is that what it's?
Yeah, airborne geophysics. It's funny. I started in that business, and I started my business in 1985, and now 3 years ago, I created another division of my company to offer airborne services. So we offer the airplanes for geophysical companies. And that has taken off. Pardon the pun again. That's taken off well, and it's, for me, it's like a full circle. It's right back to doing what I started doing. So we're offering our airplanes to airborne geophysical companies to do their exploration around the world, and so it was a natural for me to get right back into what I started with.
Now, when you're doing business internationally, you're doing business when you're looking for gold and diamonds and all that. You're probably covering third world areas. I mean, is it difficult to do business in these countries, to get in there? What's been your experience, and how did you navigate?
It's funny. We always said that the capital cities of the world never get surveyed because they've been surveyed, hundreds of years ago. So it's always the backwater areas that have to get surveyed, looking for new resources. So it was very challenging, a very risky business. And so we had a lot of varied experiences taking airplanes to other parts of the world, throughout Africa. A lot of challenges, permits and diplomatic situations, political situations. So it's had its challenges.
So you're piloting these planes, but yet you need a degree in diplomacy?
Well, I always said flying and looking after the airplane, making it work, was the easy part. Navigating through the various countries, getting permits, overflight permits, fuel, permission to get into certain areas that maybe are unstable, especially in some of the third world countries. There's a lot more to that business than just flying the airplane.
And you're flying commercially, but I would imagine people think that you might even be military.
Well, our airplanes are very bizarrely equipped. They have sensors hanging off the wingtips, big long booms out the tail. Sometimes we pull things through the air on a cable. So a lot of the configuration of the airplane look very bizarre. So for the untrained eye who doesn't know exactly what we do, they would certainly think it probably has a military application. So there we are in a different country around the world, developing resources for that country, and we're perceived as some military threat. So we've had some experiences where people have forced us to explain ourselves and what we're doing and what is that airplane, and it's put us in some precarious situations.
But you're Canadian, and everybody loves Canadians.
Well, I can't deny that having the Canadian flag on the airplane and the pack sack, believe me, everywhere we go, it's we're proud to be Canadian, and it carries a worldwide renowned attribute to be Canadian. So it's certainly been it's been a strong point for us.
So that has sort of gotten you out of some of those sticky situations?
Big time,
Yeah.
Big time. I can tell you that we've been in situations, and Canada has a worldwide reputation as benevolent and peacekeepers, and believe me, that's been around for a long time, and rightfully so. I'm very proud of what this country's done, and I'm proud to be Canadian when we're traveling. So thank goodness I was in some of the situations we were in. So
as long as it keeps you out of jail.
That's it, or gets us out of jail.
Mark Kalis of Kalusair, our profile this week on Today's Entrepreneur at 7:23 on CJD.
You know those BMWs you see in showrooms, the ones used for test drives, fully loaded, treated with special care?
Personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:25, welcome back to Today's Entrepreneur. Our guest, Mark Kalis of Kalusair, and we're talking about how Mark does business all around the world in aviation. And Mark, when you take planes across borders and to different territories, obviously some issues come up here. I mean, you have to be up to date with all kinds of different regulations all over the world. Tell me some of the challenges when it comes to the aviation industry and how you operate everywhere, really.
Yeah, it's been more and more of an issue is regulations, safety regulations. Safety is at the height of everybody's concern in aviation. We're becoming so much more aware of incidences and accidents. So there's been an international wave to consolidate and work with all different countries to enhance the safety of aircraft. So what we see often is what we take for granted operating our aircraft here in Canada, and the regulations we follow may not be what we have to adhere to when we go to other countries. So we have several other countries that don't accept necessarily everything that we do, and we have to maintain a different standard. So being up to date with other international requirements is extremely challenging and ever changing. So especially when it comes to the safety of the aircraft, the maintenance of the aircraft, and permits operating in and out of their countries, it's not just a given that you can fly anywhere you want. You have to get permission to do so.
How do you keep up to date with all these changes, not just in the technical aspects, but certainly in the government regulations, the planning schedules?
Yeah, you really got to have a network of professionals and experts that you have to resort to help you keep up with that. I think about it, the services that I offer to the financial institutions, and you can't know all of it and every country's requirements. So you have to have a network and know how to find the information and how to find the requirements. So you really have to be more up to date with where to find the information than actually knowing the information itself.
Do you find that there's more information available online today, or do you still have to go to your sources to get it?
Well, I'm very amazed to see the worldwide acceptance of this of the internet, and how you can do so much more today on the internet than you could have ever hoped to do. That would have taken us months of telephone and faxes and telexes to get the information from. You can get all kinds of forms and procedures right on the internet from various countries all over the world. So that's been a tremendous asset for all small businesses to be able to get that information so much more readily through the internet. Everybody's offering out their information, so that's been a tremendous asset.
And speaking of internet and technology, certainly the aircraft in the last 25, 26 years that you've been in business, have some of the components changed? Does it stay the same?
Well, it's interesting. The new technology is changing so quickly, and the tremendous advancements. But we still have older aircraft that are still operating that will operate for many, many more years, and that's been an area that has needed to have technical expertise. The new airplanes are supported by the manufacturers, so the older airplanes need people that have that old information to keep the old equipment running. So that's been a lot of what my background has been, that niche business to help maintain the older aircraft as they continue to stay in service and get modified and updated and upgraded. It's a challenge to keep old aircraft, old equipment working today.
The life of an average plane, it would be...
Well, the new aircraft, is completely different. If you look at some of our old venerable airplanes, the DC-3s and a lot of Canadian products, the de Havilland products, they'll be around forever. It's like they'll never die. I'm not so sure about the new aircraft because they're almost built with a finite life built into them. So it is an interesting aspect of the business. How long can we keep these airplanes flying?
And when you're thinking about the types of service or the planes that you're technically capable on, you specifically have this in mind. Say, listen, I really should maintain my knowledge in this area because, all the new planes, they're original equipment manufacturers. So you know what, my value is in some of these older models. It's
always been one of my advice to other people getting in the business, aviation business. Try to specialize, try to stay within your niche, try to stay within your boundaries, because you can't keep, there's some things you just can't keep up with, and it's too much to try to keep up with the warranty services that are offered by new manufacturers. So.
And I think, Dan, as you know, we hear in, week out, entrepreneurs, you got to stick to what you're good at. You got to stick to what you know. It's great to branch out, and you always want to reinvent yourself, as I believe Mark has done over the years, but know what you're good at, and that's what people will recognize you for. And I'm sure with this industry and this aviation, there's some interesting customers along the way, and I'm looking forward to hear the different types of customers after the break.
Mark Kalis, our guest on today's Entrepreneur. It continues in just a moment, but first, it's 7:30. Let's head over to the CJD newsroom with the latest headlines now. Here's Luciano Papilla.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur. Outstanding business people. We profile them every week here on the program. Josh Miller of Fuller Landau and myself, Dan Delmar. Our guest this evening, Mark Kalis of Kalusair. And Mark, we're talking about some of your experiences working internationally. Who are your customers and how do you find them?
Well, it's funny. I've never really advertised before. So a lot of my business background dealt with older type airplanes, the airplanes that were neglected, that there wasn't a whole lot of support anymore because new manufacturers aren't supporting, just like we see with software, with computer equipment. They don't support the older technology anymore. Aviation's exactly like it. So if for me, I kept my hands on the older technology and the customers that needed that support to keep the older aircraft still flying. So if you look at my background, a lot of work in Africa and stuff like that, there was a lot of clients over there that had North American built airplanes that had lived out their life here, but were still flying for many years to come in Africa. They still need support. So those people and that's how my name got around, is that I was a guy that could help support older aircraft. And so several clients throughout Africa, the Far East, trying to operate the older technology airplanes, they need to have technical assistance for it. So,
have you ever felt uncomfortable or had to say no to a customer?
It's always hard because, being a small business and being a service-based business, you never want to say no to anybody. And it's hard. And sometimes you got to look back and say to yourself, honestly, you can't know everything. You can't offer every service.
And you're dealing in some difficult climates.
Well, that's it. And some of them were just, some customers in very difficult environments would say, you have to help me. You just have to find a way. And so it's very difficult to say no, and
then the price goes up. It's okay.
Well, yeah, that's true. But it really developed what I called my consortium-based profile. Is that maybe I don't have the answer for you, but I will find it, and I will find the person who can help you. So that's how I developed a strong network of other professionals, colleagues in the business that dealt with a different aspect or slightly different niche, and so I developed that group, that core group of people I could count on. So yes, it's hard to say no, but when you finally learn how to say no, it's more how to get the right person to help your client out.
Now I joked about pricing before, but you're dealing in such a specialty area with, I presume, a few people or a handful of people in the world, or a couple of handful of people in the world. How do you price your services?
Well, I wish I had a good answer for that, because I'm always afraid that I'm charging too much, or I'm not worth the money that I'm charging. But I've always had, my core belief was that if you're not happy with the service that I provide, don't pay me. But if you are happy, then pay, because I'm taking the risk to offer my services with no guarantees and no long-term commitments. So, and I'm going to work hard for that. I'm going to give all the service that I possibly can. Just make sure that we're looked after, because we have to look after ourselves. Not being an employee of somebody, you have no pension plans and no big benefits. So
has experience and wisdom over the last 25 years skewed you, or said that you told yourself, listen, I certainly have a value to offer, and it's kind of creeped up over the years from pricing standpoint?
Yeah, it does get to the point where you say, the things that we do, the type of service, the long hours, the commitment, the overseas, the time zone changes, we have to increase our rates to be able to offer that level of service. So.
How do you communicate that to a customer that you have to increase your rates? Is there a gentler way to put it, maybe for other entrepreneurs out there who might find themselves in the same situation?
Well, I got to be honest, it's been very difficult for me. And if you look at some of my rates for the way that I consult for the finance companies and the big banks, and looking at their asset and giving them an opinion of its value and continued value, my rates haven't changed much in practically 10 years. And yet you look at the price of gas and all the other cost of running a business has gone up. It's very difficult to keep up with the cost of inflation. And if you overprice, then the customers may not be able to support that level of service. So that's a very difficult subject. But we have seen some modest gains and seen that our services were more accepted and
certainly something you're conscious of on a daily basis, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
You were talking about not really marketing actively, or it's kind of grown organically. People find you because of your specialty. What about the internet? Have you used that over the years to kind of branch out, or to validate, or to spread the word of your niche abilities?
Yeah, I've never advertised before, and everything was word of mouth. And in the aviation business, the community is actually a very small business. It spans the globe, but it is a small community. So everybody does tend to know everybody, so word of mouth was always the way to advertise. And if you did a good job, then people would recognize you even more. The internet has opened up a whole new aspect of that, and I found it to be an incredible tool by having something as simple as a website to say who you are and what you do. As simple as that, people want to be able to check you out, want to be able to look you up, and want to be able to see who you are. And having a website has turned out to be a tremendous asset just for people to satisfy their curiosity, if nothing else, to know what services you offer. So it's been a tremendous tool that I didn't quite anticipate the effect that it would have having a website. But it's the way to go, and everybody I think should have one to offer out an information about their business.
And certainly a website is something you may or may not have thought on your own. As an entrepreneur, a small business owner, do you have people to bounce ideas off of? Do you have a kind of a mini group or a mentor or somebody that you can kind of say, hey, I'd like to go in this direction, or I'm thinking about that, and kind of what are your thoughts on it?
I've been really lucky. If I look at my career, I've had the good fortune to be exposed to some tremendous people in the aviation business, and who have had imparted a lot of wisdom and a lot of good advice for me. So I've been very, very lucky. So over the years, and when I had ideas that I wanted to expand into, I could pick up the phone and call them up and say, what do you think about that? And that's when I often had advice saying, Mark, you really don't know that business. Don't get into it. It's very hard to support. There was always people that I could contact, colleagues in the business that weren't exactly doing what I was doing, but had a lot of experience. So I've been very lucky to stay and keep those good contacts to be able to get that advice over the years.
You've mentioned that it's, there certainly goes in cycles, the aviation business. How has recessions hit you in the past?
The aviation business, I always say it's the first thing that gets hit when the economy goes bad. It seems to be aviation. Corporate customers can no longer support their corporate operation, their flight operation. Price of gas seems to affect the expenses and the commercial viability of operating aircraft. You have a war someplace around the world, and suddenly gas prices will be affected. Aviation will take a hit. Heavens, after 9/11, we saw the entire aviation world turned upside down in a day from an event like that. So we have noticed cycles. We've watched them over the years in the aviation business, and it literally is a cyclic business. So.
Speaking of 9/11, how has the amped up security measures around the world affected your business?
Well, we see a lot of even flying to the United States now isn't the way it used to be, and we see that in the newspapers all the time. So, and all that filters down to operating even the smallest of airplanes. So, security has become a major issue. You can't go anywhere without somebody knowing where you're going to be and why and what you're doing there. So, and especially to security conscious countries like the United States. So it's I think around the world we've experienced differences, and it's much harder to get permits, overflight permits, to be able to operate in different countries around the world. We're seeing a worldwide scrutiny on security, and justifiably so with recent events.
It must be an additional financial burden to your company as well since 9/11.
Oh, it's a tremendous burden, And even when we talk about getting financing and getting the resources that you need, as soon as you mention aviation, it's difficult to get people to offer financing or to offer assistance because it's a precarious business to get into. So it's not easy even to get financing in the business.
So how I guess you've had difficulty with the banks?
Well, when you look at, when we go through recessions and the industry is tough and the market values are very down in the aircraft, we can't get it's difficult to get the banks to release funds or to grow the business if they're afraid of the industry in itself. And it takes a 9/11 event to make it very difficult to have anybody look at the aviation business for financing. So getting financing can be one of our biggest hurdles to be able to grow and expand the business in aviation. From my experience, is what I've found over the last 10 years.
And in mitigating some of the ups and downs, what about from a human resource level? Is it you hire and fire people, or it's really more of a subcontracting?
Well, we would love to be able to, have a huge staff of employees, but the business is literally so unpredictable and unstable over the years that people like myself tend to rely on other small businesses and that consortium idea to use subcontractors to help us in the highs so that we can survive in the lows when there just isn't enough business. So.
It's for Halloween, as I said, it's a scary business. It's certainly not for the faint of heart. Mark has navigated through this excellently, and I look forward to hearing, closer to the end of the show, what his one piece of advice would be for today's entrepreneur. Certainly in his business, I'm sure there's a few pearls of wisdom that he's learned along the way.
And coming up, Nick Moratis of Fuller Landau will join us for his Halloween tax treats and tricks. Look forward to that. Maybe you can help us, not cheat the government, but maybe just get some money back in clever ways, perhaps. 7:45 on CJD. CJD L'Équipelle traffic now. Here's Melinda Beaucaire.
Thank you very much.
7:48 on CJD. Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. And our guest this evening, Mark Kalis of Kalusair. And also we bring into the conversation Nick Moratis. Nick is the tax partner at Fuller Landau. Welcome, Nick.
Well, thank you.
And happy Halloween. You're here for your Halloween tax tricks and treats. Now, where do we begin?
Where do we start? That's right.
To find out I think we're all waiting to hear what kind of tricks you have up your sleeve, Nick.
Well, before we get too excited, it is tax, and that's the subject matter. But there are always tricks and treats, and figure why not? It's Halloween. It could have been out there, but Josh said, no, I'll show up tonight, so that's what I'm here for. One treat that we may want to look at, if you're planning to make a donation, and this is really the time for donations between now and the end of December, one thing you may want to consider is donating any public securities that you may have in your portfolio. And I'm not talking about your RSP per se, but anything that would be directly in your name. For example, if you had bought, say, a bank stock some time ago for $10 a share, and today it's worth $20, and you're thinking, I'd like to make a donation for $20, I could do it by cash, and sell my bank stock, get the $20, pay tax on my gain because I bought it for 10, I sold it for 20, and then give it the whatever I have left over to the charity. However, if you just call up the charity and arrange it with them and say, look, here is my bank stock that's worth $20. They will accept it and they'll sell it for themselves. But what that means is you don't pay tax on your capital gain. So you get your donation and you don't pay tax on the capital gain. So that's a little treat that we probably don't always think about.
No one would have thought of that. A lot of people wouldn't have thought of that, I think.
No, absolutely.
So now a trick, and this I've been seeing, and it is causing some concern, and I think the Canada Revenue Agency has come out with warnings. There are promoters out there who are coming to people who are approaching retirement and saying, we have a plan for you to essentially liquidate your RRSP, and we'll do it in such a way you won't ever pay tax, and don't worry about it. And people are signing up, and then what ends up unfortunately happening is you get audited. Where, the RSP had a whole bunch of money one day, and it doesn't have it the next day. And what is happening is the government's coming in and say, well, we're sorry, but this is considered cashing out your RRSP. So here's the tax bill. And naturally, they come 3 years later. So here's the interest for the last 3 years. And people are now going, oh, please do something. But the government's saying, here, this is the law. We are supposed to uphold the law. And this is happening. So if you're getting a deal that is too good to be true with your RSP, really walk away, because I'm reading the cases that are going to court, and it is really, really sad. But this is happening.
It's those too good to be true, and if you hear it and you don't understand it, check with somebody. Very, very easy to fall into a trap.
So how about a treat, though? Interest rates are very low, and the government has this prescribed interest rate, which is basically means it's somewhere in the tax act somewhere, and it's currently 1%. Till the end of December, it's 1%. Being that the rates have remained low, it'd probably be 1% again in January, and this rate changes every 3 months. So what does this mean? Well, the government is very concerned about how much money I make versus how much money my wife makes, which is worth how much my kids make, etc. But if I make a lot of money and I pay a lot of taxes and my kids don't, what if I lent them the money? What if I took the money that I had that I'm earning interest on and gave it to them and said, look, you go and invest, you make that money, you're going to pay half the taxes that I would pay. Well, that would be fine and dandy, but there's a little rule, and the government says, well, if you charge the interest that you're supposed to charge and they actually pay you that interest, we'll let you do that. And well, interest rates at 1%, that might be not that's a pretty good idea today, assuming you can get a rate of return more than 1%. So if I lend it to my child and they invest it and they make, say, 5%, well, they pay me 1%, and I'll pay my tax on 1%, and they'll pay tax on the 4%, and usually that'll be much, much lower than 9%.
So an individual that's earning quite a bit of money and his family isn't can income split and, as an overall, save a whole bunch of tax.
Right. So long as that interest is charged and paid for.
You need that in writing.
And then you need it in writing. It's usually a bona fide loan, and there's a bona fide transfer of cash, and you actually take the person receiving the cash has to invest it. And if they pay me that interest, and it's 1% right now, it could go up higher. It's fluctuated widely over the years, but right now it's at 1%. You're good. So that's a good thing. That's
could be thousands of dollars of savings.
That's right.
When you say in writing, I mean, if you're giving a loan to a family member, you just sort of draft up a contract between the two of you. You don't have to have it validated by anyone,
No.
Just like
so
that?
long as it's a contract that spells out the terms and you make sure the payments are made.
I think it's better if it's witnessed, but even then, as long as it's in black and white.
So trick.
Sure, one more trick.
One more trick.
Yeah.
One more trick. Speaking about loans, for those who are owners and who have companies, don't think that this applies to a loan from your company to allow you to do something like buy a house. Loans to shareholders is not viewed very well, and even though you intend to pay the loan back, and even though you're paying interest, the government basically gives you essentially 2 years to pay it back, or will tax you on the entire thing. So what works for the family members doesn't work if you own a businessman taking money as a loan from your company. So don't do that.
Yeah, not sometimes a very potentially bad trick to fall into is borrowing money from your company indefinitely over a long period of time. You could totally get.
You will get
reassessed.
Reassessed, I like that term. Because I knew you were thinking about another word, but anyway.
Yes.
Nick Moretus.
You were going to get bleeped. Yes.
Tax partner at Orlando. Great tips, Nick. Thanks very much.
Okay.
On The Next Passion, I'll ask you whether you can tell a fake O.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:56 remaining moments of today's Entrepreneur with our tax partner at Full Landau, Nick Moretus, and Mark Kalis of Kalusair. And Nick, we're talking about some tax treats and tricks on this Halloween. Do you have a couple others that we can squeeze in here?
Sure. I'll give you one more treat, which we've mentioned oft times on the show, Dan, is the use of family trusts and income splitting with minors. Especially when there's the sale of a family business, or when the kids do reach the age of 18, is receiving dividends to help them pay for schooling, etc., and being able to pay a child perhaps $25,000, $30,000 essentially tax-free, and have them use that money to pay their expenses. So that's a treat that's still there. There was some concern that was being changed, but the government position in the end is that this will be allowed. And a final trick, and this is something to watch out for because we all get caught. Government has a whole bunch of forms out there, which is information forms that basically tell me, please tell me what it is that you are investing that is not here in Canada. So are you buying a rental property in the States? Because there's a lot of rental Canadians purchasing properties in the States to rent, not necessarily just to live in. Please tell me about it, do a form. For businessmen, you open up a subsidiary in the States to do business. Your company has to send in a form as well. Now, what's the problem with that? The penalties, if you forget, are close to $500 a month, and can run for about 2 years if you sort of forgot.
Is there a threshold? Which
there's
you
certain
have to report?
thresholds, etc. There is thresholds and exemptions. The point being that if you see that you are doing something out of Canada that is for investment purposes, speak to your accountant. Those forms could hurt you quite a bit, especially if you forget. This one little form could cost you up to $6,000 in penalties just to get yourself back to speed.
So
and if you have multiple transactions, it's multiple times, and that's gone to court, and it just says, raises the shoulders and say, tough. You should have done it.
The rules are tedious, but you got to follow them,
That's
or
right.
bad tricks come
That's
your
right.
way. Thanks very much, Nick. Mark, just some maybe some final thoughts. What piece of advice, what words of wisdom would you give to today's entrepreneur?
Well, I think one of the biggest piece of advice that I have is stay true to your experience. Stick with what you know. Don't pretend or don't try to get into something if you're not comfortable doing it. You really have to keep your niche. You have to keep your reputation up. So I've always tried to encourage people to stick within your knowledge base. Try to stay up to speed, continuing your education, anything that you can do to stay up with the ever-changing world. But I think the biggest thing is protect your reputation and work hard and back up your work.
Thanks very much. And the one quick takeaway I'll give you, Dan, is it was a little subtle during the show, but reinvent yourself. As knowledgeable as you can be in your industry, you know that things change, industry changes, and there can be different aspects of the business. Even being true to yourself, knowing what you know best, you can still offer a little bit different here and there. So reinventing yourself as an entrepreneur, absolutely crucial as well. Thanks very much, Mark. Really interesting industry.
Thank you very much for
And
having
Nick,
me, everybody.
tax tricks and treats. I'm sure we can go on all night, but we'll let the little kids get back to their homes and eat their treats.
Thanks very much, Mark and Nick. And Josh Miller, we'll see you next Monday night here at 7 for today's Entrepreneur. News is next here on CJAD.
From the CJAD